starting with AI Radar, the segment where we break down the biggest headlines and updates from the world's leading AI players. Think of it as your quick fire pulse on what's hot in AI this week. What's hot, Jeff?
What's hot? Let's start with Google. Google quietly rolling out a powerful new feature in Gemini, scheduled actions. Think of it as setting up your own AI powered executive assistant that actually follows through. You can now tell Gemini to do things later, like remind me to call John tomorrow at 10 a.m. or send Annie the report next Monday at 8 a.m. I don't know if 8 a.m. is your time. And it'll schedule and execute those actions without you having to check back in. This is right now limited to a small test group. It works only in English and is mobile only. So a couple of limitations here. But Google does plan to expand the feature soon and make Gemini far more useful for personal productivity. There's also a little bit of safety scaffolding. If a scheduled action needs data Gemini can't access or something changes in your calendar, it will notify you before it moves ahead with that. So Gemini getting into the game of scheduled actions where ChatGPT has been, although I don't hear a lot about that from ChatGPT anymore. It feels like it kind of fell off the radar.
Well, I think Gemini is like a more obvious place to schedule things than chat, right? Because it's already in theory can access your calendar and all this other type of stuff. So feels like more likely to be used. I wonder as people start to use this if we're gonna start to see a divergence between like really functional, helpful things and things that feel a little bit creepy. Like it's gonna start to anticipate, do you want to schedule this thing? And you're gonna be like, I'm not sure I wanted you to be able to deduce that. So interested to see where this goes.
I've got the ChatGPT tasks and I've not found them super useful yet. Like they kind of like reminders, like Siri reminders on steroids, just tell me something. But I do think this is a step in that direction. You're right. The Gemini, especially given if you're an Android user and it's the native, assistant on your phone and being able to do things like send an email or check on a calendar or follow up. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think these things are all going to kind of converge over time. So it'll be interesting to see what comes next. Interesting to see Google being first in these areas, which is not typically what we expect.
Yeah, for sure. The creepy thing, like I remember when Apple Maps first started like using some intelligence and I would get in the car and it would say like, "Do you want directions to this place?" And I didn't quite feel comfortable how much it knew about my daily habits that like it knew at this time on a Monday, I'm going to the coffee shop and that's where I'm going and it wasn't smart enough to know I didn't need directions there, but it was sort of tracking me enough to know. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
I'm waiting to see when they can order the coffee for me, so it's ready when I get there and I don't have to think about it. That'll be the moment.
See, that's when, like, it goes from being creepy to just so useful that you don't care how creepy it is, right? Because the functionality is so important that you're like, "Creepy or not, I'm glad it knew I
I'm here
needed that
for it.
coffee." Yeah.
Well, let's move on. A new Wharton paper just dropped a reality check for power users of ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. It's one of the most rigorous prompt engineering studies yet, testing over 10,000 LLM outputs. And the big finding, many of the popular prompt hacks don't actually work. The quote, let's think step by step, did not consistently improve accuracy or reduce variability. And some quote unquote smart sounding tricks introduced more randomness into the answers. So, what did help? Prompt clarity, context, and constraints. Adding formatting clues, write me a list, word count limits, or avoid repetition instructions produced far more stable results. And the best single strategy wasn't a clever prompt at all. It was simply rerunning the same prompt and voting on the outputs, which boosted performance by up to 20 percentage points. And just doing it over and over and picking the favorite one seemed to be the best answer. I thought this was really both interesting and quite practical for our audience in terms of a lot of the things you hear seem to not be the best way to actually get the best results from LLMs today.
Well, and it's also a wonderful win for those of us English majors like myself, because it turns out just, like, writing really well is the best way that it's gonna be the, like, real AI training ground. If you can just be clear in your writing, you don't necessarily need to know some, like, magic coding or hack to actually get it to do what you want. You can just if you're clear in your instructions, you can get it to do what you want. So, I loved this.
Yeah, again, I think one of those practical things, just give a lot of context in your first prompt. I think another part of this that I didn't put in the summary is they said chains of prompt where you have 5 or 6 or 7 prompts where you slowly add context or to not work as well as just kind of telling it what it needs to know, giving it a very simple description of what you want and letting it do its thing. And this, I think, a little bit more on the modern model. So again, the way we use these evolving as the models change, it turns out that the things that worked on 3.0 don't work so well on 4.0, and we've got to kind of update our mental model. It's kind of fast for me. I mean, we just seem to be changing what we need to do every day or two, but that seems to be what these guys at Wharton found.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because there's been this like whole push towards, training people on how to do better prompt engineering and like classes around prompt engineering and like maybe that actually is all irrelevant at this point. Like the technology moved faster than we could actually train people on the old way to use the technology. So, yeah, I think that that's an interesting development.
I think that's the reality we're seeing. Let's move on again. This week, OpenAI pushing back hard against what it calls an overreach by the New York Times. As a part of its ongoing lawsuit, the Times asking OpenAI to retain all user data indefinitely, including chats users had requested to be deleted. OpenAI says that that demand would break its privacy commitments and force it to store sensitive customer content beyond its normal retention period. Typically, user chats that are deleted are removed within 30 days, and business customers on zero data retention plans see no storage at all. For now, OpenAI is complying under protest, warning that such data hoarding abandons long-standing privacy norms. Enterprise and education customers aren't affected, and any data retained remains locked down and inaccessible except under strict legal protocols for this lawsuit. But this one fascinating to me that we saw OpenAI out there as the bastion of defending user privacy and the right to delete. Really interesting. You think of these AI companies as wanting as much data as they can get their hands on, and here they're kind of saying, "Hey, you've gone too far in making us retain all this data in the context of a lawsuit."
Yeah, I have, and not gonna lie, very big feelings about this. I just it makes me really upset at the court system because we have been, as a those of us who have a vested interest in the regulatory community and public policy, we've been like pushing towards sensible privacy regulation for a long time with this true north of like people being in charge of their data, and they should be able to decide what data is used and not used. They should be able to delete their data. OpenAI has made that functionality available on their platform, which is great, and it's not an easy thing to do. And now the courts and the New York Times can come in and say, "Actually, never mind. We want you to ignore the consumer's preference. We want you to keep all their data." Like, it just is such a backtrack, in my point of view, that I don't love the precedent that it is setting for future model builders. So,
No, I mean, it was, and you hate to see a company that's done what you think of as the right thing, offered the user the ability to delete chats. They retain them for 30 days, but of course, that's, I think, a right reasonably, because so many of us hit delete and go, "Oh, wait a minute, I want to." We've all opened the trash can on our computer to pull out some file we didn't really mean to delete. And so they're trying to do, I think, do right by the user, and to have that stopped by the courts, it just removes the incentive to build these kind of privacy protecting capabilities into products in the first place if they're just going to get overruled by a court system in the context of a lawsuit. So I'm with you. This was kind of disappointing for the courts, kind of disappointing the New York Times asked for it. And kudos to ChatGPT and OpenAI for like stepping up and trying to defend the user's right to delete their chats. We've all been there.
I agree, and it's gonna be interesting too, like, now OpenAI is in this really awkward position where they have to comply with this thing, but how public do they make that to their users, right? Because they have been so forthcoming about making commitments to their users about how they do things, and now what are they gonna put in their UX to be like, "Well, now we're gonna keep this forever and give it to the New York Times." Like,
Kind of sort of doing what you
that's
asked. I did think it was
yeah.
interesting that they seem to be moving the data out of their primary production systems into a specific legal retention hold system that the normal course of engineering, or the people that might have access to data that was stored intentionally by the users won't have access to this data that's being stored against the wishes of OpenAI and the user. So it was interesting that they actually took a pretty good, I think, step in terms of trying to separate this from just turning off the deletion feature in their tool and letting it just build up in their normal data centers. But I think that's probably why they're out there fighting this publicly, trying to tell users, like, when you see the change to the privacy policy, understand we're doing this under protest, under duress.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, moving on from OpenAI to Meta, Mark Zuckerberg is reportedly handpicking a new superintelligence team to reboot Meta's AI ambitions, bringing on Scale AI founder Alexander Wang in a deal worth up to 15 billion. They bought 49% of Scale AI for $15 billion. Wang will lead the effort alongside top Scale AI talent, taking a senior spot in Zuck's AI hierarchy. This is all pretty crazy to me. Zuckerberg has also recruited about 50 researchers from OpenAI and Google, dangling, catch this, Annie, up to nine-figure compensation packages. The
We're doing
move,
the wrong job here.
I had to do the math on what nine figures even means. I was just kind of like, how many is that? What does that mean? This move seemingly following frustration from Zuck and top lieutenants around Llama 4's performance, and signals Meta's really aimed to leapfrog the current leaders on the path to artificial general intelligence. But this was a pretty bold move. And I thought interesting not only to make that kind of monetary commitment, but to really express their disappointment with the latest model they put out there in terms of Llama 4 and take a pretty bold step to go in a different direction.
I know it feels honestly like you throw these numbers, $15 billion, 50% or sorry, 49% of scale, nine-figure salaries. Like it feels very Bond villain. Like where's the secret island where they're doing all this stuff? It's like it's insane.
It is, I could tell my kids, maybe being an AI researcher is a pretty good job. I mean, even if you only get that job for a year, 9 figures, I think, is enough that you don't have to work for very many years.
You only need to do it for a year.
I mean, I don't know that you could convince me to do it for more than a year, with those kind of numbers. So it is interesting, although I think I read an interesting piece in Stratechery where what Ben Thompson, who writes that blog, wrote was kind of around when you think about the scale of investment in GPUs and data and the data center build outs in the energy infrastructure, once you're doing that, what's 100 million here and there to get the team to execute it? It's just like it's kind of weird to say a 9-figure pay package is around here, but
What's 100 million here and there, Jeff?
what's 100 million is not cool. You know what's cool? 100 billion. Well,
There you
my
go.
social network for all the young kids who listen don't know what that movie is, but I do think that it's, his point being that 100 million or 200 or 300 may sound like a lot, but in the context of the tens or hundreds of billions that are being spent, if you really feel like those people can move the needle on your execution even a little bit, it kind of comes out in the wash, if you're able to actually achieve that. And certainly reinforces that at least Zuck seems to believe that some huge amount of benefit will accrue to people who are first to some particular point on the AI roadmap, as opposed to this turning into some sort of a commodity race where these investments don't pay off. So I don't know if I agree with him on that, but that's what I would take away from seeing somebody put this kind of money into acquiring people. Like if we get there first, there's a huge value to that we will be able to capture.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's something we've talked about before. Is this a first person there wins, or is it a commodity race? And it seems he is on a different side from you. So, or at least it's where he's putting his money where his mouth is.
But he has access to billions of dollars to invest in his vision, and I don't. So I guess, maybe he's got a little more, well, at least a little more skin in the game, quite literally.
For sure.
For
Yeah.
his perspective. Well, we're going to keep going with the theme of big tech companies and move on to Amazon, about to be flooded with AI generated video ads. This time it's an in house tool doing the work. Amazon's new free video generator lets US sellers create polished, photorealistic ads in under 5 minutes. The tool can show products in action, supports multi scene storytelling, adds music, text overlays, and even inserts pets for extra charm. Sellers get 6 AI generated options per product, plus features like logo insertion and image to video, and a summarizer that turns long tutorials into short ads. So, Amazon really redefining product marketing at scale, especially for smart sellers who've never made a commercial before. And I think this is the key: is this really about replacing commercial? I saw this replacing the whole ad industry, or is this really about helping those small sellers who've never been able to do video do it at an economy and at a cost that works for them? But interesting to see Amazon just putting this right into their ad product.
Yeah, I do wonder, like, at what point we're gonna be so inundated with AI videos coming at us from different directions, we're gonna not really be able to recognize what's AI versus a real video. Some of them still need some work, but, I wish I could sell something on Amazon just so I can make a little video with my pet in it.
I know. I feel like I need to just start making something and selling it on Amazon just to play with. Like we talked about this last week. I need a little meta business to play with the ads. I need a little thing that I can sell, just to play with these things. But I do think, I mean, yes, on the inundated with AI generated ad video, I think is a real problem. But on the flip side, most of this is advertising type content. I don't know that you're going to have fully AI generated movies and videos. And even when you look at how AI generated content is being used in those industries, it's mostly like, oh, it used to take 2 weeks to get storyboards drawn by an artist. And now I can do storyboards in the creative meeting. So all of a sudden my brainstorm can just keep going and we can look at something, right, the speed to execute. But right now, at least production companies are still going to pre-traditional mechanisms to produce the final product. So it's being inserted into the creative process. And I don't know that you can tell the difference. And like this is a video of a watch on a wrist or a car driving through the desert. Like, does it really matter? And I think this is really part and parcel of the shift from what was, social networking. Most of these things were text-based when they started. They became image-based and they're now video-based. And so everybody not running video content is really not getting the same kind of results. And so now you're going to make video advertising scalable and cost-effective. And I think that's where these guys are really focused.
I think that's right too, and I think it's also funny when people, get a little bit up in arms about being able to tell what's real versus not real, and I'm kinda like, even before AI, those people with the deep pocketbooks having the, like, studio movies that they made, that stuff wasn't real either, or studio advertising, right? So, like, when you look at the root beer float or whatever at McDonald's, it's like soap and not the actual product, right? So, like, that's also not real. This is just, tech supported, not real. So, like, is it really that much different?
Yeah, you should go watch some of the, how they make the food commercials. There's some like, the behind the scenes videos, and it's kinda crazy what they do to get the shots that they get, and you're right, it is you should not walk into, a random version of that restaurant and take a picture of what came out on a customer's plate. That's not
Yeah,
really
it's
how
not
any of
real.
those ads are shot today, so how far
That's right.
from real are we? Really, I don't know, maybe not that far.
Mhm.
Well, let's shift gears from big ads into higher ed. Here's a bold move in higher ed. Ohio State going all in on AI education for every student. Starting with the class of 2029, all undergraduates will graduate with foundational AI fluency regardless of major. This fall, first year seminars will embed AI instruction, and university wide Unlocking Generative AI course will launch. Students will be practicing prompting, ethical use, cross discipline applications, while faculty get funding and training to weave AI into the coursework. It's part of Ohio State's Education for Citizenship 2035 strategy to future proof and keep the state competitive in an AI driven economy. This made me so happy to see somebody who's leaning all in higher ed into the AI revolution and saying, how do we prepare our students for a world in which AI is going to be the norm? And not just like our technical students, but all of us. I thought this was great. I hope it's a harbinger of things to come.
Totally agreed. This is a university after our own heart since we talk about this so much, but actually prepare people for the workforce. And I love that they're doing it for every student. It's not just the tech students, it's not just the computer science majors, it's every student is going to have this curriculum. I do think what'll be an interesting challenge to see how they keep up with is how do they keep the curriculum on pace with the tech? Like that is going to be the challenge to solve is like keeping the curriculum it's never gonna be ahead of the tech, but keeping it on pace with the tech, I think, is gonna be a real challenge, and how do you make sure that you are training your professors every year on the latest things so that they can go and incorporate into their lessons? So that's gonna be something I think that'll be a hard needle to thread, but I think it's great that they're investing in it, and hopefully it'll become a blueprint for others because I think it's so important.
Yeah, I think it'll be hard to keep on top, but I don't think it's going to be easier if you wait. I mean, these things
100%, yeah.
and you will learn things, even if the content, the prompt, you come out, oh, you should be doing chain of thought. At least you've already learned how to teach kids AI, how to engage with the tool in the classroom. And you go, okay, I got to change this lesson here because this is different. But like, that's the world. But I think you're going to learn so much from executing. There's just no replacement for being in classroom, doing this stuff, learning from the real world. And kudos to, I did say, I put a video out about this week. It hurt my heart a little bit. My parents, both Ohio University graduates, kind of rivaled with Ohio State. An OU not making it first to the AI place here, but I was happy to see it and see it happen. All right. And one last story that I thought was a fun palate cleanser here at the end, maybe not palate cleanser, but a little different take. Google DeepMind just unveiled an AI model that predicts tropical cyclones up to 15 days ahead and is already outperforming traditional weather models. So Weather Lab, which was trained on 45 years of storm data, bested Europe's top physics-based system by 140 kilometers on a 5-day track predictions and beat NOAA on intensity forecasts. So this is using AI to estimate intensity and direction of these storms. It generates 50 scenarios for each storm's path and strength and giving forecasters a clear early view of the risk of each storm. They're partnering with the National Hurricane Center and others to validate the system ahead of the 2025 hurricane season. But this to me really fascinating, Andy, because we've talked so much about can AI replace these kind of physics-based, like what's really happening? Can I understand that storm? And now going, we don't really care. We just want to know, given what's here, what's going to happen next. And these models now better than the physics-based models at capturing the future intensity and direction of hurricanes. That's pretty cool.
This is very cool. I mean, this could be literally life-saving technology if they can actually use it and they can use it as a tool for first responders to be able to predict where is it coming, who's going to need help, how do we get people out, and just in time for hurricane season, as you point out. So this is great to see.